I was 14 when I first understood what fear really was. Not the fear of dying, that comes later. The fear that nobody, not one single person on this earth, gives a damn whether you exist. That's the fear that builds empires, and that's the fear the Stoics killed. I found them by accident. I was 26, broke, sleeping on a friend's couch in a city that didn't know my name. Someone left a book on the kitchen table, dog-eared, coffee-stained, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I thought it was self-help. I almost didn't open it. But I did, and the first line I read, the very first line, was this: "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." I sat there for an hour, didn't move. Something inside me cracked open. Not broken, cracked open, like a window in a room that had been sealed shut for years. That was 17 years ago, and I have not been the same person since. But this is not a story about me, not really. This is a story about why the most powerful empire in human history, Rome, was terrified of men who sat in silence and thought. Not soldiers, not gladiators, not assassins, philosophers. Think about that. An empire that crucified rebels by the thousands, that fed prisoners to lions for entertainment, that conquered the known world and salted the earth of its enemies. This empire was afraid of men who owned nothing, who wanted nothing, who sat in bare rooms and asked questions, not because of what they could do, but because of what they refused to do. They refused to want. They refused to beg. They refused to fear. And a man who refuses to fear is a man who cannot be ruled. When Greek philosophy first arrived in Rome in 155 BC, when 3 Athenian philosophers were sent as ambassadors to the Senate, the statesman Cato the Elder demanded they be expelled immediately. Not debated, not considered, expelled. Not because they were boring, not because they were irrelevant, because Cato understood, in his bones, in his politician's instinct, what philosophy does to a man. It makes him question, and an empire built on obedience cannot afford men who question. He called them dangerous to the youth, the same accusation that killed Socrates in Athens over 2 centuries before. History doesn't repeat, it echoes. The same sound, the same fear, the same panic of powerful men who see control slipping through their fingers. But here is what they didn't understand, what no empire has ever understood. You cannot exile an idea. You cannot crucify a thought. You can burn every scroll, kill every teacher, raze every school to the ground, and philosophy will still be there, written in the bones of every person who ever looked at the world, at its cruelty, at its indifference, at its grinding machinery of power, and whispered, "You have no power over me." This is the story of the Stoics, the men Rome feared, the men Rome tried to destroy, the men who won. We've been lied to about the Stoics. All of us. Modern culture has reduced them to a caricature, emotionless monks staring at walls. Suppress your feelings, kill your desires, become a robot in a toga. That's the version they sell you. In Instagram quotes, in 10-minute productivity videos, in pastel graphics with Roman columns. It's garbage, all of it. The Stoics were the most psychologically dangerous people in the ancient world, not because they felt nothing, but because they had trained themselves to be moved by nothing external. Nothing you could give them, nothing you could take away. I understood this for the first time when I read about Epictetus, not in a classroom, in a bar at 2 a.m. on my phone, half drunk and full of self-pity after losing a job I thought defined me. Epictetus was a slave, born property, owned by a man named Epictetus, himself a freed slave of the Emperor Nero. One day, as punishment, Epictetus began twisting Epictetus's leg, slowly, deliberately, and Epictetus looked at him and said, "You are going to break it." When it broke, he said, "Did I not tell you that you would?" No scream, no plea, no anger, just certainty. A man who has already accepted the worst has no weakness left for you to exploit. I put my phone down. I stared at the ceiling of that bar, and I thought, what am I afraid of? Losing a job? Being embarrassed? Being broke? This man had his legs snapped like a branch, and he didn't flinch. And here I am, drowning in vodka because someone in a suit told me I wasn't needed anymore. That was the night I stopped feeling sorry for myself, not because I became hard, because I realized how soft I'd been. Take Cato the Younger. When Julius Caesar marched on Rome and the Republic crumbled, Cato was the last man standing in opposition. Caesar offered him a full pardon, publicly, generously, because pardoning Cato would legitimize Caesar's power. Cato refused. He read Plato's Phaedo twice, a dialogue about the immortality of the soul. Then he drove his own sword into his stomach. When his physicians tried to stitch the wound, he tore out his own entrails with his bare hands. He preferred death to submission. Caesar reportedly said, "Cato, I grudge you your death as you grudged me the honor of saving your life." Now consider Seneca, the richest philosopher in Rome, tutor to the Emperor Nero, a man who could have lived in silk until his last breath. When Nero accused him of conspiracy and ordered his death in 65 AD, Seneca didn't beg, he didn't bargain, he didn't run. He gathered his friends around him. He spoke to them about the meaning of life. Then he opened the veins in his arms. When the blood flowed too slowly, he opened the veins in his legs, then his knees. He drank hemlock, an echo of Socrates. Still, death wouldn't come. So he entered a hot bath and suffocated in the steam. His wife Paulina tried to die with him. Nero's soldiers stopped her. Seneca's last words, dictated to his scribes, were about virtue, not survival, not revenge, not regret. Virtue. What do you do with a man like that? You can't bribe him. He's already richer than you. You can't threaten him. He's chosen death. You can't shame him. He answers to philosophy, not to public opinion. And this is the part they really don't want you to understand. Every system of power, ancient Rome, modern corporations, social media algorithms, operates on the same principle. Controlling people through their desires and fears. Offer them something they want. Threaten them with something they dread. That is how empires are built. That is how they are maintained. The Stoic breaks this equation completely. A person who has mastered their desires cannot be bribed. A person who has accepted death cannot be threatened. A person who finds their worth inside themselves cannot be shamed. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This is not passive wisdom. This is the most radical act of defiance available to a human being. It removes every lever of control that power depends on. Every single one. This is why, ever. The year is 170 AD. The Roman Empire is bleeding out on the Danube frontier. Plague is tearing through the legions. Germanic tribes are crossing the borders. The economy is in free fall. And in his tent, at the end of another day of slaughter and mud, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on the planet, opens a journal. He doesn't write about strategy. He doesn't write about politics. He writes to himself about patience, about death, about how little any of this matters. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. These private notes, never intended for anyone to read, became meditations, the most influential philosophy text in Western history, written not in a library, but in a war zone, not by an academic, but by a man holding a collapsing empire together with his bare hands. So what does this mean for you, right now, in a world designed to keep you scrolling, reacting, panicking, buying? 3 practices, ancient in origin, radical in effect. First, the morning premeditation. Each morning, before you look at your phone, sit in silence and say, "Today I will encounter ungrateful people, arrogant people, dishonest people. I will not be surprised." Marcus Aurelius did this every morning of his reign. It isn't pessimism, it's armor. Try it. It changes the shape of the day. Second, the dichotomy of control. Before you worry, before you rage, ask one question. Is this within my power? If yes, act. If no, release. Epictetus built his entire life on this. It is the most efficient mental algorithm ever devised. Third, memento mori, the meditation on death, not to be morbid, to wake up. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." The awareness of death does not darken life, it sharpens it. It burns away everything trivial until only the essential remains. We began with a question. Why would the greatest empire in history fear philosophers? Because an idea, once thought, cannot be unthought. Because a person who needs nothing from you has absolute power over you. Rome fell. The legions scattered. The Colosseum is a tourist trap. But the Stoics didn't fall. Their words survived the empire that tried to silence them. And tonight, somewhere, someone is reading Marcus Aurelius for the first time, and something inside them is shifting, something that cannot be governed. The abyss stares back, and it is patient.